Well, hello, everyone. Here we are yet again, still trying to figure out Zoom. And welcome to Poetry for Tuesdays. This is a new thing. I'm Joanie Jester. This is Mark Mitchell. And we had done a few of these Zoom shows where we started in December around the holidays when we were launching Mark's book, Roshi, which is somewhere here. Should at least get the name right.
Yeah.
And people seem to like them. So we decided to get systematic about it. So Poetry for Tuesdays, every Tuesday, we will upload to Mark's YouTube channel a video of Mark doing a little tour guiding around town and reading a poem. Most of these videos are like 2 minutes, very short, but you learn a little something about San Francisco and hear a poem. And then we decided that the third Tuesday of every month, we would do one of these shows where we read poetry and share that with you. And this month, the third Tuesday happened to fall the day after Martin Luther King Jr. Day and the day before the presidential inauguration. So we thought that was kind of momentous. So we chose to feature poems about America. And whoops, looks like we have a guest host here. And I don't know how to do anything about that. Speaker view, okay, there we go.
Anyway.
Like I said, we're still getting used to the Zoom thing. Anyhow, we are featuring poems about America, past and present, bad and good, but a lot of poems about resistance and protest, because there's nothing more American than protest. I mean, this is a country built on protest.
As you can see, we have some relics.
A few relics. Okay, I'm going to walk you down through that, some of that. Okay. I got it. Okay. So we've got some protest signs from protests that we personally taken part in over the years. Not all of them, God knows. There's plenty more where that came from. T-shirts. Mark's wearing his Solidarity T-shirt from the Wisconsin Uprising, which I attended, and I'm wearing my People's March T-shirt from this last year's People's March for Equity and Justice. But we thought today we're doing poems by a lot of different people. Not just Mark's poems, we'll be doing plenty of those too. But we wanted to start off with, just why we're here. Okay. Oh, don't get silly. Okay. This is serious. Okay. The Constitution of the United States, and just remind us why we care about our country. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. And a lot of the poems we're going to be reading deal particularly with that concept of forming a more perfect union. A great idea, hard to achieve, but we keep working on it. So, Mark, take it away. What are you going to start with?
I'm going to start with one of my poems. As a poet, I don't write many political poems because reaction to an event is usually well behind us by the time the poem is finished, certainly by the time the poem is published. Although over the last 4 years, I've been doing a little more of that, as we call rapid response poetry. And some of these have been published, including this one. And so this is to take us back into the bad times. And this is the sestina of the forbidden words. And sestina is a form where you have 6 words, and in each of the 6 lines, they are repeated in a certain order. And this is dedicated and inspired by the irredoubtable Ruth Hulbert. With a head note from CNN: officials at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the very agency tasked with saving and protecting lives of the most vulnerable, are now under orders by the administration to stop using words including vulnerable in the 2018 budget documents. This uses all those words, all 6 of them. In the dream, you're vulnerable, small, twisted on yourself, a fetus waiting for limbs to awake to their diversity, still unsure of your transgender. As yet, you have no sense of entitlement, just a fear, unnamed, somehow science-based. It's cold where you dream. Evidence is based on fake mathematics, vulnerable to logic, but it isn't entitled to the attention you give a fetus. And you're small, an embryo, ungendered, and stranded in a diverse city. Your unshaped hands explore the diversity of cold walls and flowers. Your science is based only on touch, not blindness, but a trance. Gender calls your name, telling you how vulnerable you are, naked, unprotected as a fetus in the cold, with no sense of entitlement. Still, you remember books. You know what titles meant, and the cold splendor of words diversity. You would explore the city, but a fetus has no mobility, so no evidence to base direction. Everything is vulnerable to mistakes, empty eyes, small hands, gender, perhaps. Of course you're asleep. You're transgendered, fluid as snow about to melt. Your entitlement runs downhill like water. It's vulnerable as a newborn, raw cells, fresh from the diversity of division. You try to stand on a science base, but there is no footing for a frozen fetus. Still, it's your dream, and your brave fetus isn't awake, slipping between transgenders to search a city for evidence to base your journey. Your only defense, entitlement to life and death, and this cruel diversity leaves you puzzled, frightened, vulnerable. You're a poor fetus in a cold world, entitled to be untransgendered, trapped in fake diversity. You must stay faith-based, forever vulnerable.
I remember how chilling it was when it was announced that the CDC was forbidding the use of certain words. That was a moment. And the fact that you got all those words in there many, many times makes me very happy. Okay, what is your next?
Next, we want to, I had mentioned to get to that I don't write many political poems, but then where'd you go? Let me put a world here.
So much for
Vamp.
being organized.
Vamp, okay, vamp.
Right, great. The next poem is called Children of the Epoch, right?
Yes.
And who is it by?
It is by Wisława Szymborska, the great Polish poet and Nobel Prize winner. There we go.
Okay.
1, 2, 4, 7, 8.
Like I said, we're still getting used to this format, right?
Oh, no, quite frankly, I just misplaced the
bookmark.
The bookmark. Okay. No, I also seem to have misplaced.
And also, if any of you have favorite poems that fit our theme that you'd like us to read, go ahead and put them in the chat somewhere down there, and we'll give it a shot.
There we go. All
Okay.
right, finally, Children of the Epoch by Wisława Szymborska. And if you haven't read her, read her. We are children of the epoch, and the epoch is political. All my daily and nightly affairs, all your daily and nightly affairs are political affairs, whether you want it or not. Your genes have a political past. Your skin is a political tone. Your eyes are a political color. You may say what you say resounds. What you don't say is also politically significant. Even coming through the rye, you walk with political steps on political ground. Apolitical poems are also political. And in the sky, there's a moon, and that's the no longer moonlight. To be or not to be, that is a question. Oh, darling, what a question. Give a suggestion, a political question. You don't have to be human to acquire a political meaning. It's enough to be petroleum, cattle fodder, raw material, or just a conference table whose shape was disputed for months. In the meantime, people were killed, animals died, houses burned, fields grew wild, as in distant and less political epochs.
I think I may have misspoken when I advertised this as being all-American poets. They're not.
They're not.
But
No,
it's
no,
but it's still a darn good poem.
yeah.
Do you know how to find the next one? Which is actually called Political Poem.
A political poem, which should be back this way.
And this is
There
by,
we go. This is by Imamu Amir Baraka, also known as Leroy Jones, Oakland's own. Political poem. Luxury, then, is a way of being ignorant, comfortably, an approach to the open market of least information, where theories can thrive under heavy tarpaulins without being cracked by ideas. I have not seen the earth for years and think now possibly dirt is negative, positive, but clearly social. I cannot plant a seed, cannot recognize the root with clearer dent than indifference. Though I eat on shit as a normal, natural man, getting up from the desk to secure a turkey sandwich and answer the poem undone by my station, and by the bad words of Newark. Raised up to the brow, to the breach, we seek to fall for this crumbling century, the darkness of love, in whose sweating memory all error is forced. Undone by the logic of any specific death, old gentlemen who still follow fires, though are quieter and less punctual. It is a polite truth we are left with. Who are you? What are you saying? Something to be dealt with at an early, as early than the noxious game of reason, saying, no, no, you cannot feel like my dead lecturer lamenting through gypsies his false suicide.
and when was that written? You know?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
In the I believe, late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah. Oakland, always a hotbed of political action and political art. I'm going to read something from one of my favorite poets. When it comes to writing poems about the challenges of America and also the hope of America, it's really hard to beat Langston Hughes. I mean, it was hard to choose just a couple of his poems. They're just so brilliant and so right on point. But this one is I Too, and you probably all know it. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say no to me, say to me, eat in the kitchen, then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. Doesn't get a whole lot better than Langston Hughes. Okay. But speaking of people at the top of their game, there's Denise Levertov, who, it's another long one. We have a lot of long ones here at the top. I'll have Mark read this one from Denise Levertov called Making Peace.
Making Peace, a great Denise Levertov. A voice from the dark called out, the poets must give us imagination of peace to oust the intense, familiar imagination of disaster. Peace, not only the absence of war, but peace, like a poem, is not there ahead of itself, can't be imagined before it is made, can't be known except in the words of its making, grammar of justice, syntax of mutual aid, a feeling towards it, dimly sensing a rhythm is all we have until we begin to utter its metaphors, learning them as we speak. A line of peace might appear if we restructured the sentence our lives are making, revoked its reaffirmation of profit and power, questioned our needs, allowed long pauses. A cadence of peace might balance its weight on that different fulcrum. Peace, a presence, an energy, field more intense than war might pulse then, stanza by stanza into the world, each act of living, one of its words, each word a vibration of light, facets of the forming crystal.
Thank you. Okay, now you'd like to read one of yours, right? Okay. Yeah, tell me a little bit about this one.
Well, there's a few things about gun violence here, which we've had way too much of. This one is called Long El Paso Aftermath, and it's a sonnet. And you may recall the mass shooting in an El Paso Walmart, I believe. And one of the things we tend to forget about is that the victims are gone, and they're our yesterday's headline. The families, the wives, the mothers, the brothers, the uncles, the grandchildren of the victims live with us for the rest of their lives.
And if I recall correctly, sadly, I believe the El Paso shooting came during, it was like practically every day there was another mass shooting. And no, you didn't have time to mourn and absorb this tragedy before the next headline came. It was one after the other, after the other, after the other at that period. So, so go ahead.
Long El Paso Aftermath. She kisses stillness, open-eyed, awake, soft lash, brushes her always damp cheek, and teases life to open lips. Each day begins like this before a working week unfolds long before her. It's hard to make breakfast alone again, lost in vast time, deserted with ruined pictures, face down on dark tables. Names slip away like lines on her made-up face. She still wants to miss everyone, everything, but alarms sound to shadow the stillness in her sheets, and this sorrow's all she has, draped across her floor. She knows it will stay until she begins to miss grief, knowing they're gone, knowing nothing more.
Yeah, yeah. We cannot forget those left behind. Meanwhile, the world goes down.
Doesn't it though?
It does. And oh, can I read this one?
You like
it? One of our favorites, Diane di Prima.
San Francisco Poet Laureate.
Is a former San Francisco Poet Laureate. And by the way, we have a new San Francisco Poet Laureate. And so this is from the fabulous Diane di Prima. The land is in, let me try that again. Meanwhile, the world goes down. The land is inhabited by a tribe of screeching madmen who only know the raging terror behind their eyes and greed and greed and greed. You step out on your porch for a minute and are swept up, shot down, or you turn to stone. Those are the choices. There are always choices. That's what makes us great. Love her.
Any page, anytime.
Any page, anytime. She always has something relevant to say and says it well. I'm going to skip Feed They Line. It's long and we're running a little bit behind here. The next one we have lined up is called Comrade Laughter. And who's that one by?
Comrade Laughter comes from our anthology of socialist poems.
Oh, let's do that again without the glare. Okay, can you all see that? An anthologist of socialist poems, because hey, every poem needs one, right? Okay.
It's written by a man named Paul Potts, and that's all I know about him.
Okay.
Get yourself elected onto their committees. Put hunger on the dole and misery up against the wall forever. Good morning, Comrade Laughter. There's plenty of work for you here.
And that's a reminder to all of us by the way, that even if your side wins an election, our job is still to keep them honest, to keep them working, to keep pushing the agenda that we want, to remind them to work for the people. That's no matter who is elected, our job is to just keep on them and make sure that they take care of the people. So what's the next one? It's called "Oh, Make a Revolution." Oh, I like that title. Okay.
From the same anthology, and this is by G.H. Lawrence, who should need no introduction, but people forget that he was a marvelous poet and quite witty. Oh, start a revolution, somebody. Not to get the money, but to lose it forever. Oh, start a revolution, somebody. Not to install the working classes, but to abolish the working classes forever and have a world of men.
And I'm sure he meant women too.
I'm sure he did. He was very fond of women.
Yeah, well, that
ask
much I know.
Frida.
Okay. Yeah, right. Okay. What's this next one? Unbending Prayer.
Unbending Prayer, kind of on the same theme.
Oh, I want to introduce this book too.
Okay.
This is an incredible book called Against Forgetting, 20th Century Poetry of Witness, edited by the very useful Carolyn Forche. And it's organized, this is a big book.
Yeah.
Poetry of Witness. It's organized in chapters by disasters. Okay, it starts with the Armenian genocide, then World War I, revolution and repression in the Soviet Union.
All your big hits.
All your big hits. World War II is a very, very long section. Goes on to the Holocaust, the Shoah. But this is, the whole point is we should never forget. We do not forget. It goes on and on from there throughout the 20th century, around the world. And it's a good reminder that there's always struggle going on somewhere in the world. So, sorry, go ahead.
Well, now I have to find the poem.
Okay.
Now,
it's called Unbending Prayer.
Unbending Prayer by Renee Char, a late surrealist who was a hero of the resistance in World War II. And it's a prose poem. I would read the French, except I can't pronounce French. Preserve for us rebellion, lightning, the illusory agreement, a laugh for the trophies slipped from our hands, even as the whole lengthy burden that follows, whose difficulty leads us to a new rebellion. Preserve for us fate and the primrose.
We like Renee.
And just about every third thing in the south of France is named after him.
Wow. Okay.
He's quite a hero down there.
Excellent. Okay. Mask of Anarchy.
Oh, okay. Because.
No, I'm going to read this, but you go ahead and introduce it.
Oh, because even the rich white kids of the 19th century lower nobility in Great Britain were also revolutionaries. And this is the end of
Percy Bysshe Shelley.
Percy Bysshe Shelley, which he wrote in reaction to the Peterborough Massacre.
And the Peterborough Massacre, for those of us who just can't quite bring it to mind, that was?
Peterborough Massacre was an early 19th century attack of the army on British citizens who were protesting for actual labor conditions. Almost just labor conditions, period. Not like really good labor conditions. Just
workers of the world unite.
Yeah.
No, okay. Yeah. So this is, there are a lot of stanzas. What's that, 41 stanzas? I'm only going to read the last two. And these words shall then become like oppression's thunder doom, ringing through each heart and brain, heard again, again, again. Rise like lions after slumber in unvanquishable number. Shake your chains to earth like dew, which in sleep had fallen on you. Ye are many, they are few. Workers of the world unite. Okay. Who knew that Shelley was a revolutionary?
I did.
Okay.
Pretty sure I had that down.
Yeah, right. Okay. And this one sounds fun. It's called Oppression.
Oppression. This is by American Latinx poet Jimmy Santiago Baca. And there's reasons why I chose this to come after that. But this is a prison poem, really. Oppression is a question of strength, of unshed tears, of being trampled under, and always, always remembering you are human. Look deep to find the grains of hope and strength, and sing, my brothers and sisters, and sing. The sun will share your birthdays with you behind bars. The new spring grass, like fiery spears, will count your years as you stare into the next year. Endure, my brothers, endure, my sisters.
That's a wonderful poem of solidarity. And speaking of poems about the imprisoned, you may see right between us here, among the protest signs, and she's trying to figure out which way to point, it says, the death penalty is dead wrong. Back in 1990, when did you start?
Whenever they started executing people again, and so it was the late 80s, actually.
In the late 80s, California went back to executing people at San Quentin. And Mark joined up with a small group of very principled and dedicated people who decided to march 25 miles from San Francisco to San Quentin each time there was an execution. And you did that how many times?
I did it 13 times. Actually, for the first execution, I went by bus because I didn't know about the walk, Robert Alton Harris. And so I walked for everybody. I actually missed the execution because we'd made the walk and the execution was stayed, and then the actual execution happened while I was on a trip someplace else.
Right. And I joined you for 2 or 3 of those walks once I was unemployed and could do that.
Famously pictured with Jesse Jackson. Yeah.
Well, and what struck me most about, first of all, the fact that Mark would do these walks was just phenomenal to me. But this was a fairly small group of people that would be crossing the bridge and walking these 25 miles to the gates of San Quentin. And so it always made the news. The news cameras always had to have something during the day to show leading up to the execution. So Mark was on the news a fair amount. And we always heard from friends or family who saw him speaking out so passionately against the death penalty. And they'd reach out to us and say, you changed my mind. They'd said, we'd never really thought about whether the death penalty was right or wrong. It was just always there. Or then it wasn't there for a while and we didn't think about it. But, and that just reinforced my longstanding theory that every pair of boots on the ground makes a difference. Every person who speaks out or walks makes a difference. So this poem.
Now, this is called Small San Quentin Sutra. If you don't know, a sutra is a Buddhist scripture. One of the things you feel guilty about on doing these walks is that the long winding walks through Marin County is absolutely stunning. And San Quentin is one of the ugliest things in the world, located at one of the most beautiful places in the world. This is the Small San Quentin Sutra. It is impossible to be the Buddha of the death house from the outside. You may only carry images of perfect lupin in yellow broom, of a fawn breaking cover, and lay them gently in the crescent of moon suspended above the east gate, knowing it's an empty gesture.
And the California Governor Newsom actually reinstated a moratorium on the death penalty a few years ago. I hope he's missed it.
No,
We certainly haven't.
Yeah, I haven't heard anybody
Yeah.
crying out for it.
Right. Oh, another Langston Hughes. Yay. Okay. So I'm going to read this one.
Yes.
It's called I Look at the World. I look at the world from awakening eyes in a black face, and this is what I see. This fenced off narrow space assigned to me. I look then at the silly walls through dark eyes in a dark face, and this is what I know, that all these walls oppression builds will have to go. I look at my own body with eyes no longer blind, and I see that my own eyes can make the world that's in my mind. Then let us hurry, comrades, that road to find. We have work to do. We need to do it. We need to do it. E.E. Cummings, most people don't think of him as a political poet, but E.E. Cummings has something for everyone. He'd better, because his collected works is like that thick.
Yes. He also was the only person ever to translate Louis Aragon's Pont Rouge into English, and that's a poem that broke up the surrealists, the surrealist man. However, we're kind of moving to climate, which is also an issue we have to pay attention to. Pity this busy monster, man unkind, not. Progress is a comfortable disease. Your victim, death and life safely beyond, plays with the bigness of his littleness. Electrons deify one razor blade into mountain range. Lenses extend unwished through curving where-when, till unwished returns on its unself. A world of made is not a world of born. Pity poor flesh and trees, poor stars and stones, but never this fine specimen of hyper-magical ultra-omnipotence. We doctors know a hopeless case if, listen, there's a hell of a good universe next door. Let's go.
If only. If only. Except we don't want to screw that one up too. Okay, well, on that same theme.
No, this
is one of yours, right?
Yes.
But I'm going to read it. So there. Okay. One of Mark's, but I'm going to read it. It's called Menacing Heaven. The sky has swallowed time's poison. The sky is pressing on empty, miscolored streets. In this city, just one baby cries when the sky swallows her time. Poisoned skies weigh heavy, silent, in flames, but light dies and breath can't escape. Lost souls retreat while their sky swallows time. Poisoned skies press down malice on cold, discolored streets.
You may remember the day of the red sky.
Well, the rest of us call it orange, but yes.
Yeah, fine.
Fine. Yes, September 9th, the day we woke up and the sky was deep orange and we didn't know if it would ever turn blue again. We just didn't know. That was pretty scary. Okay.
That was rapid response. I wrote that day.
Yeah. A day we won't forget. I'm going to read this one too, because the next one's one of yours. Okay. So this is about the COVID crisis. And during the early days of the crisis, the San Francisco Chronicle asked people to send in poems. People were at home, they were sequestered, and a lot of people wrote in poems. And I found this one. It's by someone named Hal Savage. We do not know him, but he's a subscriber to the Chronicle, and he sent in this poem called A Corona Toast. Here's to los migrantes who risk their lives to follow two-legged coyotes into Sonoran desert or squalid camps just to work in los Estados Unidos. And to those who tar our roads and roofs, or clean our baños, or toil in the fields, hand-picking lettuce and onions or flores to brighten our lives. To those whose second tongue leads to second-class work as dishwashers and janitors, or a one-day painter who smiles and waves his brush at passing cars, willing to work for little. That's a Corona toast to the unsung essential workers who risk everything for us. Thank you. Speaking of crises.
This is on the same theme. Thought we'd, cover all the bases here and all the crises, and this is about the coronavirus, and it's a ghazal. So ghazals are made of couplets that are by formal law not allowed to really relate to each other. Crisis ghazal. Are you sick? She asked. He smiled at her true face. Laid off, he said, lightly shaping a new face. Spring kisses cherry trees and hollow streets. The city stares down germs with its cruel face. Nights stay cold. The air's almost hard. It cracks on skin, a cliff's coarse-hewn face. Newspapers, few left, scratch on pavement, the rasp of razor on an unlubed face. She's looking out an old window, waiting to restore her shadowed, unglued face. Clean hands everywhere, empty seats, marked by pointless, loud words. He's blue in the face.
We look forward to the day when we can all see each other's faces and not just masks. I'm going to take a momentary break here because I'm not good at multitasking, but I see we have a couple of things in the chat. Thank you, Harry. Do you like my new Corona hair? I just got it yesterday. And Andy says, D.H. Lawrence, Young says, Wales weep not. Wonderful. Hi, Harry. Hi, Chris. Oh, hi, Chris.
Yeah.
Hi, Andy. So we're gonna go, speaking of masks, I read this one at one of our other online get-togethers, but I asked to read it again because in this age of masks, those of you who are my protest buddies know how challenging it has been to have such a challenging year, but not be able to gather in person, unmasked, to see each other's faces, to shout out against the universe, our protests. And Mark wrote this wonderful poem called Masked Litany, and that expresses everything for me. Mouthless, we pray, thou shalt not kill. Mouthless, we weep for all the ones killed. Mouthless, we sing our songs of overcoming. Mouthless, we write our long, loud signs. Mouthless, we confess to your crimes in our names. Mouthless, we pray for the killing to stop. It has a double meaning in that this was written around the time of the George Floyd protests, the social justice protests, but also the deaths from COVID were mounting. And I just want to take a moment and acknowledge, as of today, over 400,000 Americans dead from COVID, and countless, countless others struggling in hospitals or at home. I have a family member back in ICU today. And all the families and all of the healthcare workers, essential workers, this litany is for all of you. Okay. When evil comes like falling rain. Ooh, who wrote that one? Okay.
Bertolt Brecht wrote that one.
Oh, well, I'm going to have you read Bertolt Brecht. Okay.
Oh, good. I get to read one. That's nice. Bertolt Brecht, of course, one of my favorite communists, and better known as a playwright, but he is one of the more important German poets of the 20th century, and is actually the lamp that is giving us our light is resting on his collected poems because it's thick enough for that. Like one who brings an important letter to the counter after hours, the counter is already closed. Like one who seeks to warn the city of an impending flood, but speaks another language, they do not understand him. Like a beggar who knocks for the 5th time at a door when he has 4 times been given something, the 5th time he is hungry. Like one whose blood flows from a wound and who awaits the doctor, his blood goes on flowing. So do we come forward and report that evil has been done. The first time it was reported that our friends were being butchered, there was a cry of horror. Then 100 were butchered. But when 1,000 were butchered and there was no end to the butchery, a blanket of silence spread. When evildoing comes like falling rain, nobody calls out, stop. When crimes begin to pile up, they become invisible. When sufferings become unendurable, the cries are no longer heard. The cries, too, fall like rain in summer.
Yeah, Bertolt Brecht is another one of those that you can always count on for something good.
Yep.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What's this next one? Is called Immigrants, and where?
Immigrants is another socialist poem.
Oh, okay.
By a woman who's named Lottie Kramer, and that's really all I know about her.
Okay, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna read this one because the next one is your lesson on the Second Amendment, okay? Okay, Immigrants by Lottie Kramer. And okay, I'm gonna step back a second and say, this is one of the few that is not American in theme. This is a European poem. The wolves are coming back to Germany across the Polish border. Barricades are down. The wolves slink into forests in the dark and bring a darker Russia in their veins. They sniff out ancient fairy tales, trading in omens, hunger, fear, looking for hidden spaces under rocks. At night, they cluster by the edge of woods in families of 3s and 4s, howling their wail of loneliness over the eastern villages and plains.
The only reason I wanted that included was to give a sense of the dangers that immigrants go through.
Right.
That it's, anybody who's willing to go through all that to get here.
The world round.
You
Yes,
know,
exactly.
I'm willing to have as a neighbor.
Yep.
But it kind of follows more on Brecht on the, just suffering overload. And this was another rapid response after the Marjorie Stoneman school shooting. The lesson, Second Amendment. Lie to history, they told us. We rested our heads on little desks. Pretend your sins are pure exploits and faith spares blood. So they told us while resting clenched fists on small desks. Take, they said, all you want. Exploit your false history. They told us to rest. Ignore your books. Your desk is a throne for sin. Our exploits matter. Theirs don't. You can trust us to protect your rest. These desks aren't there to hide the exploits history lies about. Let us rest behind you. Just keep your desks clean. Pretend our sinful exploits save you. Our lies are sure, they told us. We rested easy. Little desks were safe and guns wouldn't explode. Never your kids, they told us. They lied.
Remember who I was listening to last week after the events in the Capitol on January 6th, how, gee, they would have to teach Congress how to do active shooter drills just like they do young kids in school.
Mhm.
One of the sadder things I'd ever heard. But hey, that brings us back to Langston Hughes again. Okay. One of my favorites of his, called I Dream a World. I dream a world where man, no other man will scorn, where love will bless the earth and peace its paths adorn. I dream a world where all will know sweet freedom's way, where greed no longer saps the soul, nor avarice blights our day. I dream a world where black or white, whatever race you be, will share the bounties of the earth and every man is free. Where wretchedness will hang its head and joy, like a pearl, attends the needs of all mankind. Of such I dream my world. We needed something a little uplifting at
Well,
that
yeah.
point, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream, and so did Langston Hughes. And that's a world worth dreaming about. What's up next? I can't read your handwriting.
That's not the title of the poem.
Oh, okay. Well, fine. Okay.
It's Not Over is the title of the poem.
It's not over. Okay, so this one. Okay, so almost 5 years ago, Mark and I went to Atlanta for our nephew's wedding. And while we were there, we wanted to visit the Names Project. The AIDS quilt was still in Atlanta at that time. And we got there a little early before they opened, so we went for brunch at the Silver Skillet. It was one of those great, world famous, old fashioned Southern diners with, ancient waitresses who call you honey, and the food was, oh my God, so good. And this poem came from what happened that day.
It's not over. Just behind the Silver Skillet, past the parking lot, a seamstress works, mostly alone. Names are kept here, sorted, folded, cataloged. Shelves are full, and there's a backlog of cloths. This is shrine, not a list. While inside the Silver Skillet, timeless waitresses do the same work as always, quickly, adept with eggs, country ham, and coffee. One man sits. Warm that up, sweetie. About to meet his brother's name.
And that poem is dedicated to our beloved Gert McMullen, the goddess of the quilt, who has taken care of the quilt for so many, many years. That was quite a morning. Okay. This is another one of yours. So you want to go ahead and read this one? We're back to what are we back? Oh, we're back to the pandemic. Okay.
Back to the pandemic. This was inspired by a Newsweek headline, which provides the first line of the poem. The state of education. In Texas, teachers are writing their wills, covering their foreheads with cool chalk dust. Desks are haunted by ghostly coffee spills. In Texas, teachers are writing. Their will is tested by death's head lesson plans, and still children gather to bestow the gift of trust on Texas teachers, writing notes they will cover faces for the promised chalk dust.
Yeah, reading that news story that, as Texas was considering early in the epidemic, sending teachers back into schools, and they were writing their wills. That was just, your heart just stopped reading that. It was just heart stopping. Which one? Okay. No,
yes,
next is one of our favorite and everybody's favorite poets, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, San Francisco icon. And this This poem kind of sums up everything we're trying to achieve in this little session here, isn't it?
Yes. It's Pity the Nation. It's after Khalil Gibran. Pity the nation whose people are sheep and whose shepherds mislead them. Pity the nation whose leaders are liars, whose sages are silenced, and whose bigots haunt the airwaves. Pity the nation that raises not its voice, but aims to rule the world by force and by torture, and knows no other language but its own. Pity the nation whose breath is money and sleeps the sleep of the too well-fed. Pity the nation, oh, pity the people of my country, tears of thee, sweet land of liberty.
If that isn't a poem for our times, I don't know what is. And but we're down to our last couple of poems, and the next couple of poems, our friend Andy Wong. Hi, Andy. I asked her to send me a couple of these poems. She has been working with people who have been Andy, if I knew how to get you to talk on here, I would, but I don't know how to have, oh, wait a second, let's try this. Ask to unmute, okay. No, I can't unmute you. But she's been working on projects at Angel Island, which was sometimes called the Angel Island, the Ellis Island of the West. But so many Chinese immigrants came through Angel Island, and many were detained there, many for a very long time and unjustly. And they have found poetry etched into the walls of the detention center. And some of Andy's collaborators and friends, Jenny Lim, Nellie Wong, and Floy Oi Wong, have been translating these poems from the original, I'm sure I'm going to get this wrong, Hoi San Wu, a Chinese dialect that was spoken by many of the original immigrants. And they're like among the last few people who can speak it and translate it. But why don't you go ahead and read what you've got there?
A couple of very short poems. They had to be carved into the wooden walls, so they're going to be short. Young children do not yet know worry. Arriving at Gold Mountain, they were imprisoned in the wooden building, not understanding the sad and miserable situation before their eyes. They still want to play all day like calves. And then one more. Bored and filled with 100 feelings, I'm imprisoned in this building. Seeing the surroundings stirs one who is sad. How can one stop the tears? I recall the ship starting off for the land of America. Looking back, the moon has repeated its cycle.
Andy, thank you. And if you can drop into the chat, maybe you have already, Andy, if you can drop into the chat a link for people to follow if they want to find out more about your Angel Island projects, that would be wonderful. Now I'm going to read a poem that you all know the last 5 lines. I swear to God, you all know the last 5 lines, but you probably don't know the rest of it. And when I mentioned to Mark the other day that I wanted to read this poem, he brought it out and I read it and I started sobbing while I was reading it. I was just so moved because this is, again, the promise of America. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she, with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore, send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. And I cried again.
And she cried again, which is why we have another poem before she has another one to read.
Right. But that's the poem, which is an Italian sonnet, by the way. The New Colossus is by Emma Lazarus, of course. And she was, according to many sources, the first major American Jewish poet. And damn, that poem holds up. Okay, I'm gonna.
Well, she gets unverklempt here. We're trying to end on a hopeful note here. So here we have a speech to the young, speech to the progress towards by the great Gwendolyn Brooks. Say to them, say to the downkeepers, the sun slappers, the self-soilers, the harmony hushers. Even if you are not ready for day, it cannot always be night. You will be right, for that is a hard home run. And remember, live not for battles won, live not for the end of the song, live in the along.
Gwendolyn Brooks is another one you can hardly go wrong. Just something, every time I turn to her, there's something wonderful. And this is, we're going to end on this incredible note here. Tomorrow is Inauguration Day. And this amazing young woman, 22 years old, a young woman from Los Angeles, was chosen to write and perform tomorrow the poem for the inauguration. Her name is Amanda Gorman. Remember that name because she's going places. She's really going places. But I found another of her poems, which again, just, I'll try to get through it without crying. And it's a little long, but bear with me because it's totally worth it. This young woman has something to say. It's called In This Place, an American Lyric. There's a poem in this place, in the footfalls, in the halls, in the quiet beat of the seats. It is here at the curtain of day where America writes a lyric you must whisper to say. There's a poem in this place, in the heavy grace, the lined face of this noble building, collections burned and reborn twice. There's a poem in Boston's Copley Square, where protest chants tear through the air like sheets of rain, where love of the many swallows hatred of the few. There's a poem in Charlottesville, where tiki torches string a ring of flame tight round the wrist of night, where men so white they gleam blue seem like statues, where men heap that long wax burning ever higher, where heather higher blooms forever in a meadow of resistance. There's a poem in the great sleeping giant of Lake Michigan, defiantly raising its big blue head to Milwaukee and Chicago. Poem begun long ago, blazed into frozen soil, strutting upward and aglow. There's a poem in Florida, in East Texas, where streets swell into a nexus of rivers, cows afloat like mottled boys in the brown, where courage is now so common that 23-year-old Jesus Contreras rescues people from floodwaters. There's a poem in Los Angeles, yawning wide as the Pacific tide, where a single mother swelters in a windowless classroom, teaching Black and brown students in Watts to spell out their thoughts to her daughter, so her daughter might write this poem for you. There's a lyric in California, where thousands of students march for blocks, undocumented and unafraid, where my friend Rosa finds the power to blossom in deadlock, her spirit the bedrock of her community. She knows hope is like a stubborn ship gripping a dock, a truth that you can't stop a dreamer or knock down a dream. How could this not be her city, su nación, our country, our America, our American lyric to write, a poem by the people, the poor, the Protestant, the Muslim, the Jew, the native, the immigrant, the black, the brown, the blind, the brave, the undocumented and undeterred, the woman, the man, the non-binary, the white, the trans, the ally to all of the above, and more. Tyrants fear the poet. Know that we know it. We can't blow it. We owe it to show it, not slow it, although it hurts to sow it when the world skirts below it. Hope, we must bestow it like a wick in the poet so it can grow lit, bringing with it stories to rewrite, the story of a Texas city depleted but not defeated, a history written that need not be repeated, a nation composed but not yet completed. There's a poem in this place, a poem in America, a poet in every American who rewrites this nation, who tells a story worthy of being told on this minnow of an earth, to breathe hope into a palimpsest of time, a poet in every American who sees that our poem penned doesn't mean our poems end. There's a place where this poem dwells. It is here, it is now, in the yellow song of dawn's bell, where we write an American lyric we are just beginning to tell. Thank you all for joining us today. I see there's one more thing in the chat. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Andy, for putting in that link.
Yeah.
We're going to send that out to people who weren't with us today so everybody can see that. And tomorrow is a new day.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean, though, that we don't still have work to do. So remember, no matter who's in office, left, right, center, whatever, we all need to keep working. Thank you. Okay. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.